So I'm just going to hand over to Lúí. Lúí, apart from, as well as working for CoinJar, he was formerly an anthropology researcher at University College London. And so he's going to talk about how Bitcoin fits into that history.
Thank you. So I just finished my dissertation working on the kind of social and cultural side of Bitcoin. And I took as my starting point the story about the guy in Wales who left his hard drive in the dump. Did you? Yeah, see, yeah. And this got great coverage, and it was like £4 million hard drive hidden in a dump in Wales. And everyone got very excited about it. But I think this story kind of captures the novelty of Bitcoin in all its glory, because the monetary value lay within that hard drive, within a small file under a megabyte in size, in a number essentially, right? A 256-bit number. So if we wrote that out in alphabetic terms, it'd be about 70 digits. So the idea that you can have a number of less than 100 digits that is worth £4 million is unlike anything we've had before ever, you know. So people talk, you know, people struggle with this idea of like, well, why does Bitcoin has no intrinsic value? Because it's not a thing, and the value of it lies within the properties of those numbers. Okay, so what is it that allows this number to hold this much value? Well, this is how I conceptualize of Bitcoin. And this is the blockchain at the center. This is your database with the digital tokens in it. But the ecosystem with the people and the infrastructure and all the money is actually where the money the value lies in. So if people ask to explain how Bitcoin works, I think the blockchain is it's just one angle of it. It's the mechanics, the engine at the center of it. But this is a very social phenomenon. What has happened? A transnational community creating its own currency is without precedent. Actually, probably is with precedent, but that's, yeah. Okay, so let me just talk through this very quickly. At the center, we have this database, and this database has these tokens in it. And if you are happy to download this 25 gig file to your computer, and your friend is as well, you can transfer tokens back and forth to each other, and that's fine. But for mainstream adoption, for these tokens to circulate in a meaningful way, you need this layer of apps and services that people have been building. And this is where all the money has gone into the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I would argue that this is central to turning these tokens into meaningful monetary units. And if you look at the money that's coming in from Silicon Valley and investors, I think it's about 80% going in towards the apps, and about 20% going in towards the mining infrastructure. So, and that's for the blockchain. I mean, it's negligible, the amount of money going into direct blockchain development. Because the blockchain and a lot of the ecosystem, but especially the blockchain, it comes from a culture of free and open source software. So there are a lot of cultural inputs into that allow Bitcoin to happen, and one of them is that we have tried and tested methods for building distributed computing projects before, since the early 90s, I suppose, with Linux, and also for building kind of non-technical distributed projects like Wikipedia and so on. So Bitcoin is an open source project. Now there's a contradiction here potentially between the kind of non-monetary norms of open source culture and the proprietary capitalism inherent with the Bitcoin, but that's kind of another debate. It's also I call it libertarian politics and anti-bank sentiment. Arguably, it's the same thing. There's no question that politics has driven a lot of the kind of Bitcoin enthusiasm, and I've always argued that that's partly as a result of the financial crisis. The first line of the blockchain includes the words, it says, "The Times, 3rd of January 2009, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks." And now this is just intended as a timestamp, so this was the the project originator saying that this did not exist. This was not created before the 3rd of January. But it also gives a sense of the kind of conversation that was happening at the time that Bitcoin was launched. So it was just post-financial crisis. Politicians and people in the financial sector were scrambling to find solution to a problem that we hadn't really dealt with before. And in the process, we were kind of redefining the rules of what was and was not possible in finance. So in that sense, the U.S. Congress, which was usually the arena for $1 million squibbles, was suddenly signing an agreement to create $700 billion for a bailout for the banks. So in that sense, we were redefining what was possible with money. And so I think the fact that Bitcoin appears at that time is very telling. But in terms of the crisis also led to a decline in trust in general across institutions. This is something that's been observed, mainly in the West, where trust in banks has gone down, trust in governments has gone down, trust in mainstream media has gone down. We had, at the same time, the economic precarity of a certain generation of young men, and lots of people, but included in that, I think that role of economically alienated young people in Bitcoin is sometimes overlooked, especially because some of them are now quite rich. But anyway, and then the media is hugely important for Bitcoin. So you have this symbiotic relationship where the media hones in on an aspect of Bitcoin and it makes a great story, and in the process they drive more attention towards Bitcoin, and that drives up the price, and then that makes a media story and goes back and forth. Okay. So as part of my research, I did a survey. I've done 2 surveys of the Bitcoin community. I think they're the largest. Certainly, the 2013 one is the largest one, I think, out there, which asks kind of qualitative questions rather than purely numerical stuff. And then I did it again in spring 2014, and I got less responses. And I think that's very interesting because a few things happened in that year. For one thing, the price of Bitcoin went from about $50 to about $500, and that tenfold increase in wealth totally transformed the way people thought about these things that they had that they were playing with. You also had a huge amount of media attention in late spring and summer of 2013, and then again in the autumn of that year. And so I think there was an element of kind of research fatigue. The Bitcoin community in general got used to journalists turning up and wanting to talk to them, academics turning up and wanting to talk to them, and so on. But anyway, those are the 2 things. So who uses Bitcoin? Well, some obvious results. It's mainly men. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of that, but it's always over 90%. It's improving gradually, and this is a kind of a result of the fact that it's at the nexus of libertarian politics, finance, and technology. So it would make sense that it's inheriting the gender biases of all those different communities. Age range is about median of 30 and interquartile range of 24 to 38. So half of Bitcoin users are 24 to 38. So that. When people are asked to define how they see themselves, their role within the community, user, investor, and supporter were the main roles that people said. And non-religious, and by that I mean basically you get a lot of the properties of kind of geek culture more generally you see in Bitcoiners. So some non-obvious results. A majority of community members have never mined Bitcoin. I don't know if this... so Adam talked about the mining process. So essentially, yeah, it's where you are contributing your computing power to the network, and in return, you get some Bitcoins, in theory. In practice now, the network is so powerful that your desktop, your gateway computer at home isn't going to do much to help. So most people don't do it. A majority are not libertarian. I think it's something that some of the most involved Bitcoin community members are very active libertarians, and they kind of forget of how colourful the political map of Bitcoin more generally is. A majority have never attended a Bitcoin event, but they do feel part of a community, and that's usually defined in global terms rather than local terms. And also a majority of community members do use their Bitcoin. This is occasionally I hear people say, well, they don't use it, they just hoard it. But actually, in terms of, yeah, people use it when they can. But I mean, one of the things about Bitcoin transactions is that it often won't make financial sense, or let's say won't make economic sense in a totally price rational view of the world. So if I go into the pub in Hackney, I could give them a fiver, my crumpled fiver, and then get a pint in return, or I could take out my phone and do this, send it a Bitcoin transaction, and it would take a few minutes to clear, and it would add a complication to me getting my beer, and it would cost slightly more as well. And I've done it, and lots of other people do it, but it's not a rational choice because there's so much friction at the moment in a real world purchase. So there is a huge kind of social, cultural value attached to using Bitcoin. That's novelty, isn't it? So when asked why people did actually get involved, it's curiosity, profit, and politics were the main reasons. So practical concerns come much later. So that's Bitcoin is, to some extent, a solution in search of a problem, arguably. But Adam would disagree with me on that. So I've talked about some of this already. These are some of the reasons why people use Bitcoins. I think number 4 is one of the most interesting and one of the ones with the most long-term potential. Bitcoin bridges different systems with poor interfaces. So because it's an open platform, anyone can plug into it. So we had 2 different companies running 2 very different types of digital wallet there, and they were able to talk to each other and have an instant transaction in a way that, say, PayPal can never do, because everyone using PayPal is a closed network. So in that sense, Bitcoin is akin to the internet, and PayPal is the kind of the AOL of comparable. Okay, so self-reported use, and this is obviously self-reported, so it may understate drug use, and it may but to be honest, I think it captures it. I'd say most people online just doing an anonymous survey are happy to tick the box saying what they've done. And gifts and donations is the one that most people have used. And this is something that I think is getting a bit more coverage now, but there's a really rich gifting culture within Bitcoin. And it's a kind of transaction that wasn't possible before, but Reddit being the best known example, where people, who like something someone else has said, or they like a video that someone has made, or they like some code that they've contributed to a project, they can give them some cash in a kind of frictionless way, whereas that just wasn't possible before. I mean, to put it in general terms, I think Bitcoin offers an economic advantage in any transaction where you don't need to be in the same place, and where the identity of one or maybe both parties is irrelevant. Because if you want to buy something from someone in eBay and you both need both your identities need to be confirmed, then you're not at any friction. Whereas if you're paying someone who's done some coding work and they've done the coding work and you can see they've done it, you don't need to know who they are. You just need to know it's been done. And so Bitcoin is kind of frictionless. So that's it.
Thank you, Lúí.